going back to like why I started Panic Button, and I just, like I said, talking helped, and I was like, I need a realistic I need a realistic solution. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to start a podcast. I had no intentions of having any guests on it. I was like, I'm just going to talk to myself. And if people like it, they like it. Great. And I asked my mom and my partner, I remember it, I was like, do you guys think this is a good idea? Like, do you think that anybody would find value in this? Like, or am I just going to be wasting my time? And they both looked at me and they're like, well, you don't really talk about your feelings. So do you think this is a good idea? They're like,
It's like
because you know
30
that
seconds.
you have to be vulnerable, right? And I was like, okay. I was like, fair, very fair. I was like, but my drive behind it, and I'll stand on this, is I didn't have help when I got diagnosed with this. I was given medication in college and told, Godspeed, good luck, like figure it out. And I would have loved to have heard stories of people going through it that didn't make me feel like I was going insane or like I was an outsider, like people that were actively going through it, everyday people like myself. And that's where I was like, okay, if this works, it works. So I got a microphone and started recording it. My first couple episodes released in January, and the feedback was great. People were like, thank you for talking about mental health and sharing your stories and just being open. I would go on there and just rant for 15 minutes and people were like, it was great. They were like, we love the authenticity of like what you're going through, and you're just being so transparent and open and showing the reality of mental health. And I'm like, yeah, because we're all going through it and it's not talked about enough. Mm-hmm. I said, so if I'm not going to talk about it, who's going to talk about it? You got to be that change that you want to see. So I was like,
goosebumps. That's one of my favorite lines.
So I was like, all right, I was like, let's do it. So, and now I think we're like 12, 13 episodes. Don't quote me, but they come out every Monday. I was fortunate enough, obviously, to have you on and other great people in this network that we've met. And it's been great. People want to come on. They want to share their story. They love that I give them a platform, a safe space to do that. And it's very humbling, and I love it. And I hope that it gets in the right hands, the people who need it. I know I'm not a therapist. I don't give medical advice. I'm not a doctor. Grey's Anatomy does not count. But yeah. I hope that some people take something away from it and just see the authenticity of this is real and we're going through it, and we're going to figure it out, whatever that looks like. So
one of the things I really like, at first I thought you were crazy when I saw this, because you have posted on your social media that, hey, and I think you say it in your podcast too, hey, if you have a story and you're interested, reach out to me or fill out this, form, contact me form. And at first I was like, oh my God, you're going to attract like, you know what I mean? Like,
you're like, I don't know.
I get people DMing me trying to come on my podcast, and like, my podcast is, I just realized this, I've been talking about it like nonstop, but I just realized my podcast is very like stream of thought. Like, what am I thinking about in that time? Oh, I got to go find someone. And it started last week because I had a expert on burnout come on my podcast, and she just recently wrote a best-selling book, The Cure for Burnout, Emily Ballesteros. She's getting all sorts of shout outs from me everywhere these days, because I'm like, I've been feeling so burnt out. I've been, and if I'm being authentic, every time a new season of the show comes out, it's really hard. And sure. I don't feel right. And then I talk to people from it, obviously, with the foundation and everything. But I don't feel right, because it's a reminder that now comes every 6 months for several weeks, if not months at a time. And it's just a reminder that like, wow, I did this thing. And then it reminds me like, oh my God, I got married. And then I lost that relationship, and how important it was to me, how important she is to me, and how important the family is. And I just get myself in this rut, right? Where I'm like there, but I don't remember. Oh yeah. So my podcast is very stream of thought. Like, what am I thinking about right there? And I'm like, I'm feeling burnt out. I'm kind of struggling with, focusing and getting the things done I want to get done. And then I found her book, actually looking for, burnout resources. And I'm like, oh, I got to have her on. And so I get a lot of people that want to come on the show, and I very much want to do. I wish I could do that, right? I wish I could do what you're doing and say, hey, person, come on. And I don't mind talking to anybody, right? I think that's what's cool about shows like this and yours. But I think it's very cool and very unique that you're inviting anybody on who has a story to tell, and or at least give them the opportunity to reach out to you. And I think that's such a very rare thing in the podcasting space, especially because everybody hustles who's doing a podcast. It isn't easy, despite like people think it's this cakewalk. It's just really not. It's a lot of work, and it's not money. There's not a lot of money unless you're a big one. So people are chasing, people are chasing larger guests with bigger followings and stuff like that because they want to pop a podcast. And so, instead of doing that, I think it's cool that you're just inviting normal people on, because those kinds of conversations are the ones that people relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, that's kind of like something that I've recognized as well. Like, I get a lot of DMs of like therapists who want to come on, and I've got some people that have been like, I don't know, like, I don't like talking to therapists because they just try to come on and doctor the situation. I'm like, no, like, I literally, the conversations I've had with therapists are super fucking cool because they are literally like surviving and working in the industry that they battle themselves, So like the therapist that I've talked to, it's more of like, well, what's your story? Because like we never take the time to think about like the stuff that my therapist is going through. It's always like, I'm coming to you with my problems, so screw your problems. So I let them like air out their dirty laundry and talk about the opposite side of it, So it's great. I'm like, oh, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not here for the advice. They're not here to doctor anyone. They're here because that's another part of mental health we don't talk about, is how hard it is for these professionals to be mentally sane, to be honest, like to keep it cool, all the things that they hear, all the things that they battle. So I was like, well, you guys deserve a platform as well, so come on, let's go.
Yeah.
We'll take them all.
When I first started with my therapist, one of the things I told her, because I had a therapist when I was like 21 for a little bit, not very long. I wasn't ready. You got to be, that's another thing with therapy. You've got to be ready to do the work and learn stuff about yourself that you may not want to learn.
Exactly.
And so that's the bit. But with mine now, I was like, hey, like the personal human connection is going to be super important to me. So like, I do need to know about you. I honestly don't even think I care if she made it up, as long as it was consistent. But one of the things that last year was, the last 2 years were probably the two hardest of my whole life. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I did a little bit of coaching. And I struggled with imposter syndrome doing that, because I'm like, I want to like curl up in a ball and die. Why am I coaching, people on how to show up as their better self, right? And she told me, she's like, nobody becomes a therapist unless they're like fucked up themselves. And so she's like, at the very least, they make the best therapist because they can relate, right? Yeah. And I think people also, and you make a great point on this. People think, I don't know that people have the right perception of what therapists are and what they do. They're not, they're clinical, or they should be, at least in this state they are. They're clinical, mental health counselors, but they're not doctors, right? They may have a doctorate in psychology, or some may be psychiatrists too. I don't know the nuances of all that, but they're actually, I almost think like therapists are really communication experts, because they help you communicate with them, communicate with others, and communicate with yourself.
Absolutely.
And they teach you how to reflect. They're not, I don't think they're diagnosing as much as people think. Like, people think they're going to walk in and it's like, boom, you've got A, B, C, D, here's the DSM-5, and now here's how we fix you and you'll be good to go in 2 weeks. It isn't like that. No. It's a constant reflection. It's a constant changing the way you communicate with yourself, changing the way you communicate with others, changing the way you communicate at work. It's just a constant state of reflection and asking yourself, why do I feel this way? Why is this upsetting? Why did this happen? and just reframing things to talk better to yourself so that you can show
Yeah.
up better as yourself. So
Right.
I think it's great. You should have therapists on. I do too. And sometimes it's more fun. Sometimes it's more serious. It kind of depends on what my mood is, but they're normal people too. They're not
Yeah.
unattainable,
Nope.
unrelatable people that are like authoritarian or better than you.